Hello there and welcome to our nightly news program coming to you live on All 24 News Channel here from Algiers. Next are the headlines. Supported by its diplomatic weight and its contributions to Africa, Algeria is preparing to participate in nominations for non-permanent membership in the Security Council. Also ahead in our news, in light of the clashes in Tripoli and a warning of escalation in western Libya, the Supreme Commander of the Army holds an emergency military meeting and the National Unity Government launches the second phase of the security operation in Zawiya. Coming up next as well, hours after the new truce entered into force, battles resumed in the major cities of Sudan, and Al-Burhan threatens the Rapid Support Forces to use lethal force. And drones target Moscow in the second attack of its kind in a month, and Kiev is subjected to the third massive attack by drones within 24 hours. Hello again and welcome to the details. First off in our topical news, Algerian Foreign Minister Mr. Ahmed Attaf arrived on Tuesday in New York at the headquarters of the United Nations on a working visit to prepare for the elections of non-permanent members of the Security Council slated for June 6th by the General Assembly. Algeria will take part in these elections as a candidate for the period from 2024 to 2025. According to Algerian Foreign Ministry, Mr. Attaf is expected to hold meetings with many representatives of the member states of the United Nations, as well as the Secretary General and senior officials of this international body. Still with the same story, Algerian Minister of Foreign Affairs Mr. Ahmed Attaf revealed the goals that prompted Algeria to run for non-permanent membership in the UN Security Council in the upcoming elections. Mr. Attaf stressed that Algeria is seeking this important position to embody its commitment as an influential actor in facing international challenges. Zahra Farjani with the report.
Algeria is preparing to take part as a candidate of a non-permanent member in the Security Council for the period from 2024 to 2025 in the elections to be held on June 6 at the United Nations General Assembly. This step aims at reaffirming Algeria's principles and sharing its vision regarding issues on the Security Council's agenda in the field of international peace and security.
Algeria is a country of peace, a country that yearns for freedom, equality, justice and fairness. These are the values that my country wants to contribute to making them enhance the system of international relations.
Algeria is running in this election so as to better represent Africa, unite its voice and secure a stronger position within this international body for a more effective protection of interests and legitimate aspirations of the continent amid the recent global challenges.
To achieve the goal of unity, we ought to employ the weight of our continent and make its voice heard in various international forums and devote the aspirations of our countries in dealing and interacting with other states on the basis of equal sovereignty, security, balance of interests, and equitable interdependence.
A broad support emerged from the African bodies to back the North African countries' intention in joining the UN Security Council.
We renew our deep gratitude to each of the African Union, the League of Arab States, and the Organization of Islamic Cooperation for the endorsement and recommendation of Algeria's candidacy. We look forward to the support of all brotherly and friendly countries to carry out this continental covenant with all loyalty, commitment, dedication and sincerity.
With this wide support, Algeria is on the right path for receiving its non-permanent seat in the UN Security Council for the period of 2024 to 2025, with the goal of upholding the principles and objectives of the United Nations Charter for a better future for all.
Nicaraguan Minister of Foreign Affairs Denis Moncada has expressed his country's desire to reopen its embassy in Algeria in the near future. A statement from the lower house of the Algerian parliament quoted the Nicaraguan head of diplomacy's confirmation during his meeting with the chairman of the National People's Assembly, Ibrahim Boughali, in Abuja on the sidelines of the inauguration ceremony of Nigeria's president. Algerian President Mr. Abdelmadjid Tebboune awarded the Medal of National Merit of El Athir to Portuguese President Marcelo Rebelo de Sousa. The rank of El Athir is one of the 3 ranks of the National Order of Merit in Algeria, and it is the only national medal that can be awarded to heads of friendly and brotherly countries. Last Monday, President Abdelmadjid Tebboune paid a state visit to Portugal, which falls within the framework of strengthening relations of friendship, cooperation, and good neighborliness between the 2 countries. To other news now, plans to transport hydrogen from Algeria to Europe via pipelines have received support from 3 main EU countries. The ministries of energy in Italy, Austria, and Germany signed a joint political letter of support for the development of the Southern Hydrogen Corridor to Europe to be operational by 2030. The hydrogen corridor to Europe, also called South H2, is 3,300 kilometers long, led by the main operators of the European distribution system. Still with Algerian economy, the giant oilseed crushing plant in Béjaïa province reopens after being frozen for years. The compound, which belongs to Civital Group, is considered the 4th largest oilseed crushing complex in the world, with a production capacity of 2 million tons per day. A project that would transform Algeria into the most important producer and exporter of edible oils in Africa.
The Civital Group cooperates closely in support of the strategy of the higher authorities regarding the issue of food security. The public authorities have facilitated the creation of a strong oilseed processing sector in Algeria by setting up a subsidy mechanism that encourages farmers to produce colza and sunflower seeds.
To other regional news now, President of Libyan Presidential Council, the Supreme Commander of the Army, Mohammed al-Menfi, chaired an emergency military meeting on Tuesday in the presence of Prime Minister, Minister of Defense, Abdelhamid al-Dbeiba, as well as other top officials. The meeting came according to a statement by the Libyan Presidential Council to discuss the recent military developments in the western region, strengthening security in the capital, Tripoli, and the cities of the western coast, as well as mechanisms to confront outlaw groups in a way that supports and enhances stability in the region. Still with Libya, the Ministry of Defense of the Libyan National Unity Government announced on Tuesday the launch of the second phase of its security operation, which began last Thursday in the city of Zawiya. The ministry confirmed in a statement that the operation targets dens of fuel smuggling, drug trafficking, and human trafficking gangs, emphasizing the operation will continue until the desired goals are met. Hours before the ceasefire extension was signed, residents reported intensive fighting in Khartoum and adjacent cities. Since the beginning of the crisis, nearly 1.4 million people had to flee their homes, including more than 350,000 that have crossed into neighboring countries. Let's follow the latest with Marwa Belaiwer.
After military factions battling for more than 6 weeks agreed to extend a ceasefire aimed at allowing aid to reach civilians, clashes subsided in Sudan's capital on Tuesday. Yet, according to residents, the sounds of fighting in some areas could be heard.
This morning there was clashes between the RSF and the SAF in North Bahri, and here in North Omdurman the army have used its heavy artillery in order to target the locations of RSF in North Bahri.
the army and the paramilitary rapid support forces agreed to extend a week-long ceasefire deal by 5 days, just before it was due to expire late on Monday. Sudan's top general Abdel Fattah al-Burhan met on Tuesday with some officials and soldiers in Khartoum, where he said they are fighting for the Sudanese people.
We will keep fighting and will continue reaching out for peace until the last soldier is alive. We are willing that people live in peace and security. Almost 2 months the Sudanese people are suffering, and are being killed, and are being displaced. They left the country.
Away from politics, Sudanese refugees caught in crossfire of Khartoum's conflict are seeking solace in neighboring Chad, where kinfolk, despite their own struggles, are providing safe haven.
We arrived here at 1 a.m. as soon as we heard that the militia were coming. We fled in a hurry without taking anything. When we arrived, we stayed under the tree in front of this concession, and the owners came out to find us. They wondered why these people were staying under the tree at this hour. When they found out it was us, they put us up in their house. After that, they shared everything with us. Their kitchen, their toilet, their clothes, and everything else. Since that day, we only eat and drink with them. They're very nice to us.
However, even when refugees manage to arrive in Chad, they are faced with a spillover of violence from the unstable border and living in dark conditions, hindering their search for safety. Sudan refugees in other countries such as Egypt and Ethiopia are not living any different from the ones in Chad, as they are in need of humanitarian assistance, according to the United Nations.
Dozens of settlers led by extremist Zionist Rabbi Yehuda Glick broke into Al-Aqsa compound from Al-Maghariba Gate under heavy protection from the Zionist occupation police, who targeted citizens and obstructed their movements. According to local media sources, settlers carried out provocative tours and performed Talmudic rituals at Al-Aqsa Mosque and its yards. With Palestine still, dozens of armored Zionist military vehicles, including bulldozers, invaded North Shams refugee camp east of Tulkarm in the northwest West Bank and caused serious damage to homes, cars, and street stands during massive invasions and violent searches of homes. The official Palestinian news agency Wafa reported undercover Zionist soldiers infiltrating the refugee camp but could not ambush and locate Palestinian resistance fighters before dozens of armored military vehicles invaded it. On Tuesday, Lebanon's army intelligence freed in an operation along the Lebanese border with Syria a Saudi national who was abducted in Beirut and also arrested some of those involved. Saudi's state-run Al-Ikhbariya television station reported late on Monday that a man working for Saudi Arabian Airlines had been kidnapped in the Lebanese capital on Sunday and that those responsible had demanded a ransom of $400,000.
We now have 9 detainees with the Lebanese Army's intelligence in relation to this incident. We here assure that this incident does not impact the Lebanese-Saudi relations. The diplomatic relations between Lebanon and Saudi are steady, established, and no one can threaten or shake it.
I can't in this moment but to thank the Lebanese Army Command, Security Forces and Intelligence, especially Interior Minister Bassam Maulawi, who was following up the incident from early hours until we completed the operation with full professionalism and with a speedy response. I express my thanks and my appreciation. Thank you, Minister, for the efforts. I also want to stress that Saudi national underwent medical tests and thank God, his health is good.
In a speech to the General Assembly of the Federation of Turkish Chambers and Stock Exchanges in Ankara on Tuesday, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan reiterated his country's goal of establishing security and peace in its surroundings, from Europe to the Black Sea and from the Caucasus to the Middle East and North Africa. The Turkish president also emphasized that his government is determined to compensate for the welfare losses the society suffered from, citing the government's intention to reduce the high level of inflation to single digits.
seçim sürecini tüm yönleriyle
We will work to ensure that peace and stability prevail in our region, and we will also strengthen our economic and trade cooperation with countries from the region, as well as consolidate our diplomatic relations. Our goal is to establish security and peace around us, from Europe to the Black Sea, and from the Caucasus to the Middle East to North Africa. We have taken many important steps in recent years. We have removed the problems between us and brotherly and friendly countries. We have strengthened our relations with the Turkish world. We have improved our relations with the Islamic world. The government is determined to take steps to protect citizens from high inflation and reduce it to single digits. To ease this burden on the people, we will attract investments to Turkey.
To the Russia-Ukraine file now, Moscow has been targeted with a large-scale drone attack for the first time in its 15-month-old, let's say, conflict in Ukraine, marking a new inflection point in the conflict. The report is signed by Sofian Kantouri.
The Russian-Ukrainian conflict is taking another path. That was clear after the statement that was made by Russian President Vladimir Putin, where he said that Russia is not using means which are being used by Ukrainian tycoons. For its part, Russian Defense Ministry said that 8 drones had been fired at the city of Moscow, in what President Putin called it a terrorist attack by the Kiev regime.
As you know, the Kiev regime has chosen a different path. The path of attempts to intimidate Russia, Russian citizens, and attacks on residential buildings. This is of course a clear sign of terrorist activity. First, I want to say that the Moscow air defense system worked in the regular way, although there are things for us to work on.
Russian Defense Ministry said 5 had been shot down, and the systems of 3 were jammed, causing them to veer off course. For his part, Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu said that the West was stepping up equipment and arms supplies to Kiev, ahead of what he said would be a large-scale Ukrainian offensive, and said Moscow would strike any supply routes it detected.
Military support to Ukraine merely drags military activities out further, but cannot affect the outcome of this special military operation. Using NATO weapons, those empowering Kiev continue to carry out strikes against social facilities and perpetrate terrorist acts against Russian civilians. Our military forces are firm in their response to the actions of the Ukrainian militants.
Ukraine's presidential advisor Mikhailo Podolyak said Ukraine is not directly involved in the drone attack in Moscow. Podolyak said attacks in Moscow are a less interesting event for Ukraine, and their efforts are directed to strengthen air defense system in Kiev. According to Kiev's mayor Vitaly Klitschko, Ukrainian capital has been hit by a 4th Russian attack in 2 days. He made the statement when he visited the site of residential building that caught fire overnight after being struck by debris from a destroyed Russian projectile.
We understand that we need to strengthen the air defense system of Kiev, and we are constantly thinking about it. Regarding Moscow, or Moscow's drone attacks, I understand it is important for you. But for us, it is a much less interesting event. But what is very important to understand, we're being drawn into the era of artificial intelligence.
Despite the Russian warnings, Ukraine is still promising a counteroffensive backed with Western weapons, which makes the solution to end this conflict impossible for the moment.
Russia's defense ministry said on Tuesday that its forces carried out strikes on Ukrainian decision-making centers in Ukraine. Russia has made operations in Kiev 17 times in May with drones or missiles, mostly at night, in an apparent attempt to sap morale. But Ukraine says US-supplied Patriot anti-missile defenses are achieving a 100% interception rate. Ukrainian drones struck wealthy districts of Moscow on Tuesday, Russia said, in what one politician called the most dangerous attack since World War II, while Kiev was also hit by air for the 3rd time in 24 hours.
In the last 24 hours, Russian armed forces carried out group strikes using high-precision, long-range airborne against central decision-making centers where terrorist attacks on Russian territory were being planned under the direction of Western intelligence experts. All designated targets were hit.
International Atomic Energy Agency Chief Rafael Grossi on Tuesday asked Ukraine and Russia to respect 5 principles to safeguard Ukraine's Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. suggesting he had not secured their agreement to protect the facility. His 5 principles included that there should be no attack on or from the plant, and that no heavy weapons such as multiple rocket launchers, artillery systems and munitions, and tanks or military personnel be housed there.
I see these commitments as essential to avoid the danger of a catastrophic incident. Number 1, there should be no attack of any kind from or against the plant, in particular targeting the reactors, spent fuel storage, other critical infrastructure, or personnel. Number 2, ZNPP should not be used as storage or a base for heavy weapons. For example, multiple rocket launchers, artillery systems, and munitions and tanks, or military personnel that could be used for an attack from the plant.
NATO military alliance will deploy an additional 700 troops to Kosovo, Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg said on Tuesday, a day after 30 NATO soldiers and 52 protesters were hurt in clashes. Unrest in the region has intensified since ethnic Albanian mayors took office in northern Kosovo's Serb-majority area after April elections that the Serbs boycotted, a move that led the US and its allies to rebuke Pristina on Friday. Stoltenberg also called on both Pristina and Belgrade to take concrete steps to de-escalate the situation during the news conference.
KFOR, the NATO forces, will take all necessary actions to maintain a safe and secure environment for all citizens in Kosovo. And we will continue to act impartially in line with our United Nations mandate. We have decided to deploy 700 more troops from the Operational Reserve Force for Western Balkans, and to put an additional battalion of reserve forces on higher readiness so they can also be deployed if needed.
The Chinese Foreign Ministry said that Washington should respect Beijing's sovereignty and create appropriate conditions for communication between the defense ministers of the two countries. And the U.S. Department of Defense announced on Monday that Beijing had refused to accept an invitation extended to it to hold a meeting in Singapore between U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin and the Chinese Li Changfu. For his part, spokesman for the U.S. Department of Defense and that of Beijing had informed the United States of its rejection of an invitation it received in early May to hold a meeting this week in Singapore that brings together the two ministers. Top congressional Republican Kevin McCarthy urged on Tuesday members of his party to support a dual-party deal to lift the $31.4 trillion debt ceiling and avoid a catastrophic default. Earlier on Tuesday, members of the hardline House Freedom Caucus held a news conference to attack the agreement, which they said did little to address the U.S. debt problem or to rein in government spending. And finally, the news in brief by Islam Said.
The United Nations said on Tuesday that the operations to salvage more than 1 million barrels of oil from a decaying tanker moored off Yemen's coast will soon begin. After a technical support ship arrived on site, the UN launched a fundraising to collect $129 million to remove the oil from the Safar and transfer it to a replacement tanker. Heavy rain and hailstorms caused flooding in Turkish capital of Ankara on Tuesday. Main roads were submerged underwater, and dozens of cars were dragged by the flash floods without reporting any casualties. The EU said on Tuesday that it is doubling its aerial firefighting fleet for the summer of 2023, citing challenges such as increasing forest fires due to the climate crisis. Several people, including children, were injured as gunfire erupted along a beach boardwalk in Hollywood, Florida. According to initial investigation, interaction between two groups resulted in the shooting. One person has been arrested and another suspect is still on the loose. A shootout on another Mexican highway left 10 suspected criminals dead and 4 police officers injured. The shootout comes as the country struggles with drug cartel violence and a high homicide rate. Indigenous protesters clash with Brazilian police exchanging arrows and tear gas. The protests come as the Brazilian Congress votes a bill, which the indigenous say will limit their ability to win protected status for ancestral lands.
The end of our program. Thank you for watching. Cheers.